So this title might be a little bit misleading, however, it's not at the same time, and I want to explain that. So let's just address the elephant in the room. The Phoenix Suns just lost in 6 games to the Denver Nuggets, and I'm not as mad as I thought I'd be. I really thought, I'd be pissed off. And if you see the podcast episode we're about to drop today, yeah, I was very pissed off and I went on a rant, which you guys will definitely see. Now, that's not to say I'm not about to cook this entire team and basically make Phoenix Suns fans hate me, but let's just talk about it for a sec. So I think first off, we gotta address Devin Booker, and I feel like it'd be disingenuous if I did. So like 3 days ago, I think, or 4 days ago, whenever the video dropped, I made a video calling him a superstar, and I knew if Booker had like 1 or 2 bad games, people were going to instantly turn on him, which not to say it's not justified. If you're playing bad, you're playing bad. And I mean, there was a conversation I know that like, oh, he was the best player in the world. And as much as I love Booker, he was never the best player in the world. He might have been playing like it for a couple games, but you could have also said TJ Warren was playing like the best player in the world in the bubble. Like it was just a couple games. Needless to say, I thought it still could have made him a superstar, and I still believe that to be true. And I will talk about Jason Tatum in another video because these two things do correlate. But regardless, I think we do need to talk about the Devin Booker and elimination games kink. Spex, what is the Devin Booker elimination game kink? That is the kink where Devin Booker plays like absolute shit in every single elimination game he's ever been thrown in. Now, I will say before people just try to, shit on Booker, I'm going to say this, and some people may think I'm trying to cope, but I truly do believe this. I think there is a fine line of Booker playing bad and Michael Malone game plan. I don't think it's a coincidence that in game 5 in the first half, Booker played amazing and it seemed like nothing had changed, but in the second half, he went completely cold. I'm not going to say like he didn't play bad, but I think game plan was also a very important part of that, and Michael Malone should deserve some credit. As far as Booker playing bad though in elimination games, I don't think it's really something you can coach or something you develop. I think just over time, he needs to be thrown in these situations a lot more, and we can hopefully see him blossom. I think next we got to talk about Kevin Durant, and this one's going to be a lot shorter of a segment than I thought it would be. The conversation is starting to be had about Kevin Durant, which I don't know how justified it is, but after seeing Curry's age, yeah, I'd say it's pretty justified. I will say the one thing that Kevin Durant didn't want to happen, which happened in Brooklyn, basically just happened in Phoenix again. The only difference is he does have his teammate with him in Devin Booker, but the rest of the roster is looking like garbage. But it's not the situation where KD's dropping 50 and the whole team is just playing bad. This man isn't playing the best as well. Like, we've seen a drop off in the second half with Kevin Durant, and it's been very apparent, which is why for a period of time people were asking, yo, is Devin Booker better than Kevin Durant? Which he definitely was. Now, also while we're here, I guess we should talk about that trade that happened during the trade deadline, and no, I don't regret it at all. A lot of people are seeing what Mikal Bridges is doing in Brooklyn, and to be honest, it's amazing, and I'm still rooting for this guy. But I don't think that happens on Phoenix, KD or no KD. Mikal was not going to be the first option on this team, and honestly, in the situation, he really shouldn't have been. With him being the first option in Brooklyn, it opens these opportunities where he's been developing for the past couple years, and he can really show his development and how he's played. In Phoenix, he was only going to be just a shot creator, a guy that at max could probably cap out at like a 20 points per game score. But in Brooklyn, at his peak, I could see him averaging around 30 points per game. As far as Cam Johnson goes, again, that was a rotation piece. I knew we were going to lose if we ever made this trade, so it was just to get it done. But I still don't regret this because I don't know how this would have gone if we didn't get KD. Would Phoenix even be considered to be contenders if they don't make this trade? I honestly don't know. We go from there to talk about Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton because I'm going to throw these guys in together. Chris Paul, I think just needs to retire. I don't think there's any more left in the tank for Chris Paul. I don't know why he's still playing. I mean, it is very apparent this man, for one, cannot stay healthy, and two, has just lost a step. There are some things that he still does bring, but to be honest, it's not outweighing the negatives that he is clearly showing. I think there's also a possibility that Chris Paul just does play the remainder of his contract out, which if you're Phoenix, that's not a good thing unless you're trying to trade him. Hey, so this is actually the next day, and it just came out that the Suns are going to be aggressively shopping Chris Paul in the offseason. So do what you will with that information. Now let's go back to past specs. And at this point, if you're trading him, it's just to remove cap space. I don't know if you can get value for Chris Paul like you used to. Like, I've seen the possibility of a Kyrie Irving trade trade in some people's mind, and if you're doing that trade, I don't know if Chris Paul's in there. And if he's in there, it is literally just for cap space, just to fill that void, because Kyrie is a pretty expensive player. Now, DeAndre Ayton, this is, this one hits a little close to home. So before I go ballistic on him, in game 6, or at least before, it was reported that he had a rib contusion, which I don't know how true that is, to be honest. On one side, it could explain why he's been so, ass and why he hasn't been aggressive and why he just doesn't seem like himself. But at the same time, for the past like 3 seasons, I've seen this play out once again. And I'm usually the person defending players when they have injuries, and I want to believe them. And in this case, I'm still going to believe that DeAndre Ayton has some kind of injury. But I think it is very telling that while on the bench, we can clearly see this man trying not to laugh as his team is getting destroyed. I would be very surprised if next season he comes back and he's in a Phoenix Suns uniform, or at least in a justified way. It seemed like last year he was emotionally checked out, physically checked out, like he did not want to be on that team anymore. And Phoenix, they had other plans to keep him. Now granted, I've said this a million times, I still believe it was to make that Kevin Durant trade, which they could have made at the time. But looking back, they had Nick Claxton, which was, now looking at it, a better player than DeAndre Ayton, so honestly they didn't really need him. It would have just been a waste. There's no reports really saying that DeAndre Ayton is going to leave or when he's going to leave, so I'm not even gonna really talk about him leaving the team, and I'm gonna have the mindset that he's staying next season. DeAndre Ayton needs to figure his shit out. There's no other way to put it. He hasn't been that good on defense, and quite frankly, every aspect of his game that made him a good player basically disappeared in this postseason, and it really showed who he actually is. And I know the Phoenix Suns community for the past like 2 years has been divided on this. It's like a civil war about, oh, let's defend DeAndre Ayton, or oh, let's absolutely tear this man to shreds. And I'm not gonna lie, during this whole time, I've been completely in the middle because I didn't really know how to feel. However, after this postseason run, I'm definitely on the side of shredding DeAndre Ayton. Look, we can't just keep coping for players if they're playing bad, even if there's a possibility of, oh, he had this injury. This has been apparent for 2 years, so we're not going to just blame this on recent play. Recency bias does not play a factor. However, what does play a factor is the fact that this man has been absolute garbage, and now people are finally starting to see it. I know some people probably want me to go ballistic on DA, which at this point, I don't have the energy to do. One, because I'm just so sick of the bullshit going on. Like, this is a very repetitive thing. But number 2, on my podcast tomorrow, I know that is such a terrible plug, but I actually said some things that I don't regret, but yeah, they're gonna look bad. I do want to end on this though. If DeAndre Ayton had a lick or even a small percentage of Mamba mentality, I'm telling you, this man would be a borderline all-star, maybe superstar. That might sound crazy, but he has talent. That doesn't surprise me. He has a lot of things to be great, but the unfortunate reality is this man just either doesn't care or he's scared. It's one or the other. And that's not going to make you a good player if you're absolutely scared to do anything or nothing at all. Now listen, I know a tale as old as time is losing a playoff series or losing some games and then screaming, it's the coach's fault, get him. Which is why for the past couple years I've been defending Monty, but again, I am at the end of my rope, and this time I actually have a pretty valid excuse. I've been looking at these games with a different lens. Ever since I've gotten into this media space, I've learned to look at the game from a different perspective. Not just as a fan, which I obviously am, but at the, I guess, basketball knowledge perspective, if that makes sense. And what I've noticed is that Monty Williams does not know how to coach a team anymore. That, or he's just playing with these terrible cards that he's been dealt with. But regardless, there are some things that he can control, like the rotation. And the fact that this man Landry Shamet is playing over 5 minutes per game in a series is blasphemy. The fact that this man got a DNP in game 3 and Phoenix's defense looked amazing, and then you play him more games and y'all start losing, it's very weird to look at. And I know in game 4, this man had honestly his best game, I'd argue. In that quarter more specifically, he was the reason why you could argue Phoenix was able to get away and win. However, it was just him making wide open threes. And the fact that we were celebrating him finally being able to hit open threes is kind of funny when you think about it. Also, can someone tell me where Torrey Craig went? This man was a starter at one point to now just being thrown away. I don't know if Monty's doing this on purpose, but this man clearly does not know what he's doing, and it's starting to show. And it's not just that, there are multiple things he's done and players that he's played that he shouldn't have, and it's just very frustrating. I would love to win a championship with Monty Monty Williams as the head coach. I really would, but I don't see a world where that can happen. And quite frankly, Phoenix is in a win now situation and they don't have time to spare. So getting rid of Monty might actually be beneficial in this situation. Obviously, to a point, the Suns fan in me is disappointed on how the game ended, but also, and I said this earlier, I'm just tired of it. Like, I'm tired of seeing the same exact result happen 2 years in a row. And the difference, nothing really changed except Phoenix had one superstar player who might not even be considered a superstar anymore. I know there are more conversations we're gonna need to have, like, is Kevin Durant even that good anymore, which might sound like a stretch. Should Chris Paul just retire? Is Devin Booker even a superstar? Regardless of all those questions, I think Phoenix is gonna have a very interesting offseason that will more than likely dictate the future of their team. Real quick though, I do want to say last season during this time, I did take a break right after, and it was completely coincidental because I was having some stuff that happened last year. However, don't be fooled, that's not happening this year. In fact, I'm uploading more than ever. I do have a documentary that is supposed to be coming out in about 3 days as long as everything goes right. So make sure you guys are checking that out. And I will say that this actually does hold relevance to the topic we talked about today, wink wink. Also, I talked about it earlier, but my podcast, The Starting Five, is uploading an episode today that should go up, I don't know, around the afternoon. You're gonna want to watch the podcast, man. It is very interesting. I did a rant on the Suns. My boy Ja went in on the Warriors. We had some pretty funny moments. I think you're gonna like the podcast as a whole. But yeah, to the Phoenix Suns fans that are just gonna leave my channel till next year, later. And for the actual people that enjoy what I do, I appreciate you, and I'm only gonna keep putting out great stuff. Oh, and no matter what happens, it's still go Suns till the day I die.